So thank you for being there for this new session of the think tank Air Mobility of ENAC alumni. I'm glad to be there with Alejandro. I'm going to introduce him in the right way in a few minutes. Just excuse me, Alejandro. Wait for me 2 minutes. I'm going to send some. I'm gonna just explain the dynamic of the webinar. So yeah, we're going to talk about product design in the drone sector and how to comply with regulations in Europe. Okay, I know I saw there are some people that are not from Europe, so this is an important information. Like this concerns mainly the European regulation, but you are free to send your questions, requests, remarks, or comments by the chat. Okay, so don't hesitate to contribute. This is going to be reachful not only by the things that we are commenting here live, but also for your comments. So don't hesitate to interact on the chat. On the other hand, let's try to not open the microphone. Okay, to not create noise, and we are gonna have the occasion to ask questions. I'm gonna transmit the questions to Alejandro at the end of the session. So if you have questions that you really want an answer, you can write them down. I'm gonna put an emoji saying that this question I'm taking it into account, and that's going to be answered at the end of the session. We're going to talk around 30-40 minutes, and then last 20-15 minutes, according to the progress of our webinar, is dedicated to answer questions. What else? Yeah, this webinar is being registered now. And so for this reason, we can upload it later to YouTube. It's going to be available on YouTube, so you can consult all the information later. What else? Yeah, important to say is that as any other event or action from this think tank, this is not sponsored. This is not a sponsored event. This is an independent event, as all the past events. So yeah, I thought it was important to mention that. Yeah, this is all like trying to be transparent information with the only goal of transmitting information that I try to make it the most reliable possible. So this is not an sponsored event. So yeah, that's it. I think I didn't forget anything, and that I can introduce my guest. So welcome again, Alejandro. Alejandro de San Félix, HERRERA, PERDOMO. But I will call you Alex during the session.
Not a problem.
It's easier to me, and I'm happy that you are here. So I'm going to introduce you first, and then you can complement if I missed something. Alex is an aeronautical and mechanical engineer with experience in both civil and military UAS domain. Previously head of the UAS division at Alter Technology TUV North, leading the accreditation of the first notified body in Europe and president of the Notified Bodies Group in Europe. During this previous role, he worked very closely with EASA and standardization groups. He specializes in product and component design for UAVs in the civil and military market. He's responsible for manufacturers' product assessment to ensure compliance with the relevant regulations. He performs advanced safety analysis for regulation compliance in certification processes. Currently, Alex is Senior Consultant for Product Safety at Murzilli Consulting. Is that correct?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julio. Glad to be here, and thank you for everyone to taking part of your day to hear us talking and chatting a little bit. about the class marking and Europe regulation or European regulations, which I believe it's very important to know where we are and where we are going and how to better understand them.
Thanks, Alex, for this introduction. So with no further ado, let's proceed with the discussion. I prepared some questions to you. So first of all, Alex, what's your opinion of the current regulatory framework for drones operation in Europe?
Well, Julio, thank you so much for your question. Before diving in the specifics of the regulations and stuff, I think our guests should have a little bit of a background story on what do we have or what is currently established in Europe. For awareness for everyone, we in Europe right now, there exists two main regulations, both from 2019. One of them named 2019 945 regulation, and another one 2019 947 regulation. In this sense, today we're going to be talking about the 945 regulation, which actually talks about the assessment of the products, of the product certifications, etc. And 947 is going to be related to more specifically into the operations. Just to sum up, the whole regulation here is divided in Europe, just for our colleagues from out of Europe here today, is divided depending on the risk from the open category, which would be the low risk scenario, to the specific category, which will be the middle risk scenario, to the certified, which will be the traditional certifications such as the CS23 or the CS25, like an Airbus A320, for example. From my point of view, I think EASA is doing a great job in developing all these frameworks. It's not an easy task. As you probably are aware, all the drones have been there, I don't know, like from 2010, even before. Some people could argue here that even before then. And now we're starting to see new regulations, which people tend to believe that they are just roadblocks in the way for the manufacturers, for the consumers, etc. But from my point of view, I think all CAAs, and especially EASA leading all these groups, are doing a slow work because it's a hard work to do, regulating everything, making sure that all the regulations are satisfy all the needs, either for safety purposes, for consumer purposes, and in the end for the manufacturers, which will drive all this regulation. But although they are slow in the changes, they are very steady. And we haven't seen any drawbacks or any big changes from what has been established here. I think they are taking into consideration the influence from the industry, which I believe is very important. From my past and in my current position, I'm participating in a lot of standardization groups, a lot of events, and I see a lot of demand from manufacturers, a lot of attendees from consumers, even non-aerospace people are participating here. And all of them are putting all their opinions and all their information towards driving the future regulations. And I think EASA is paying attention to this. Moving forward, I think there is a little bit of a misunderstanding with these regulations, and a lot of manufacturers, consumers, etc., doesn't commit to comply with them, or doesn't understand them, or try to avoid them, etc. And it's created somehow an economic burden on the manufacturers. Especially, there was almost no regulation before 2022. I'm saying 2022 because it's when people started to really think about this class marking and stuff. And then suddenly there comes a regulation with a transition period. Everyone has to adapt. Some people haven't even think about it. Therefore, the economic burden on them was a little bit hard. But now I think the curve is getting down again, and everyone is starting to go in a smooth way into these regulations. Lastly, I think EASA is not working themselves towards the regulations. Basically, they are using a lot of inputs, not only from the manufacturers, not only from industry, but also from associations such as JARUS. For those that you don't know, this in the specific category, this specific risk assessment called SORA, the Specific Operation Risk Assessment, which has been developed by JARUS and implemented by EASA, which, by the way, we are looking at seeing SORA 2.5 for those of you who know it in the next months. And the last thing is that I believe in January 2026, when this transition period is coming to an end, is when we are going to start seeing this market as a more standardized market. At the beginning, we are just seeing like the the main companies out there getting the certification, getting the class marking, etc. But after 2026, when this transition period stops, is when we are going to start seeing all the companies complying with the regulations and seeing more of this class marking in the sector.
Okay, interesting. This last part you mentioned makes me wonder: is there gonna be a still place for for drones that are not class marked in the industry?
There will be a small place for them, especially the privately built systems. But the transition period, as of today, only allows for legacy drones to be flown. Basically, if you have purchased your system before 2024, is when you can still use them. There is a little bit of a misunderstanding there, or misunderstandings on these systems. But from 2026 onwards, only class marked drones could be sold in the European market. So for a consumer business point of view, only class marked drones could be able to be sold in the European market.
Okay, interesting. And it applies to the open and the specific category.
This is an interesting question. I think it never comes to life here, but keep in mind that the class marking is mandatory when you place your system for being flown in the open category. So basically, it's a decision from the manufacturer if they want to place it in the market for those open categories. If they are targeting, for example, this class marking is limited at 25 kilos, but if you target your system for 30 kilos, then at this stage, as of today, there's no class marking, but you go directly into the SORA, into the sale assessment, and it's a different process. But there's no pure certification on it.
Got it. Thanks for your answers. I have another question for you. So do you think it is important to clearly understand the regulations for a drone manufacturer or an operator?
Well, I would say definitely yes, because it's very important to understand the regulations. I know it's very complex. I know there are a lot of words in a regulation, but it's always worth to read them through, understand them, get support from your partners, colleagues, peers, etc. In this sense, I've been dealing with companies for quite a while now, and there's always a big differentiation between a big company and a small company. And please, feature-wise, technology-wise, probably even the smaller companies are even better than the big ones. But the big companies nowadays, they are structured, and internally, they know that the regulations are an important task that they have to achieve, they have to comply with in their processes. For small companies, it's a little bit different because they centralize, and please take my words lightly because not all of them are like this, but it's the normal sense here that small companies tend to just focus on the features, just focus on the technology, which is actually what is driving European technology and worldwide technology forward. These smaller companies pushing the limits, basically, but they tend to forget about the regulations. What happens is that when they don't take into account these regulations down the line, when they have a business plan or they don't consider them at the beginning, they will have a big problem down the line. Like when they want to really enter the market, when they really want to make the money, they cannot make it because they haven't considered this. For a big company, it's a little bit different because they are probably going to have even a full department just focus on regulation and how to take them into considerations since the beginning until the end. And from my point of view here as well, I think this also, although it's not mandatory, it comes also with an aerospace background. What I mean is that there are a lot of companies out there, especially in the drone sector, that they might not have an aerospace background. I don't say it's good or bad. It's just that they might not have an aerospace background, and they will focus only on these only on these features, only on the technology, and tend to forget about the bigger image here. But normally, if you have an aerospace background, you are used to aircraft, you are used to planes. You know that you have to deal with the certification at some point, even if it is something small. Therefore, having this aerospace background will put a little bit of sense into like, hey, we might need to achieve this at some point.
Yeah, sure. I can imagine some scenarios where a manufacturer that he created a nice drone, uh, it entered into the aerospace industry without knowing that he's actually entering into the aerospace industry. If you know what I mean, like they wanted just a drone that flies and provides services, and maybe with a nice sensor that is different in the industry, and without realizing it's putting up a step a foot into something that is much more complex than that. And it's good. I mean, I think it is an advantage if you become aware of that in the early stages. I mean, I totally agree with you.
And also this regulation, I think, is one of the first. I don't know, probably there might have been some other regulations similar to this, but it's the first time that is mixed because it's not a EASA regulation anymore. It's an EASA regulation also mixed with the product regulation. So basically, it's like dealing with, I don't know, I could say, I think I've said these examples many times, but like my mouse here, you have
Mhm.
to have certain regulations because it's a product. It's more about the CE marking, which you'll probably have some questions afterwards,
Yeah.
but you will have some requirements, or you have to deal with the European Commission as a normal product certification, but also with the EASA because we are talking about systems that perform a flight.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks again for the answer. So my next question is actually about the CE marking. So why this CE marking slash C class marking? I hope that you clarify that for us. Why is this important?
Well, just as you mentioned, I will clarify a little bit on the CE marking and the class marking. We are used to hear a lot about the class marking, C class marking, and also CE marking. And I've been working with a lot of customers and a lot of partners and peers that there is a misconception that CE marking is the same. So whenever I get my C class marking, I'm already CE marked. Well, it's not the same. CE marking is allow my French here, but it's Conformité Européenne, which is like the symbol or the label that says that the manufacturer is complying with all the regulations. Okay, and then there is the C class marking, which allows the manufacturers to say, hey, I am complying with one of the regulations. So to sum up, and I don't want to make a big deal out of this, you need the C class marking to put your CE marking label, but sometimes the CE marking is not required for a C class marking. Okay? For example, imagine a mouse. You can put the CE marking, but you don't have to comply with the drone regulation. Therefore, you don't need the C class marking. So it's a little bit of a difference. So class marking is only if you comply with the 945 regulation. I would say that these CE or C class marking are really important because we as consumers, and I'm not going to say anything about the aerospace or the UAV world, we as consumers rely a lot on these regulations. What I mean, I don't hesitate to buy a new phone or a new mobile phone or a new Samsung or a new iPhone. Why? Because I know there must be some regulations for which they are complying with. Basically, I'm not worried that when I make a call, there's going to be a lot of radiation coming from my phone and I'm going to get deaf or something like that, because there are a lot of regulations set in place. And as long as they are somehow marked or somehow certified or they comply with these regulations, I'm happy. I'm happy. I'm safe. I know that I don't have to worry about it. Something similar is happening with the drones now. So at the beginning, we could hear in the past that, well, what if that drone falls out of the sky? What is going to happen with this? I mean, no one is checking this. Well, this regulation is now putting in place certain requirements that you have to comply with. And if you don't know about drones, if you are just a bystander, that you're just walking by or even in the outskirts of a city, and you see a drone flying, with this class marking, CE marking, must not be any more worries because as long as they are C class marked or they have gone through the CE marking process, etc., of course, you don't have to worry about them. There are regulations in place now to assess this. And of course, the market inspections are going to ensure these activities. Lastly, I just want to make a differentiation because there is the small category or let's say the C-class marking, okay, which is up to the 25 kilos, which are some requirements that are simple enough. They're not simple, but they're simple enough, okay, because you get allowance to fly in certain conditions. This is the open category that we discussed before a little bit. But when you move down the line, you go for the SORA assessment, the sail category of your flight, which I don't want to go into it, but it's divided again in 6 classes now. The more you go, the more you scale up, the more the risk of the operation, the higher the certification will be, ending up with the certification category, which will be exactly as an airplane. Julio, you and I, we met in London a couple of months ago. We didn't worry about getting on a plane and fly all the way to London, right? Because there are some certifications in place for it. So we are sure that this is safe enough. So the same thing is happening with the class marking and the CE marking.
Interesting. Okay, next question. What are the biggest challenges for drone manufacturers in order to align with these new regulations?
Well, there are a lot of challenges. There's always a lot of problems at the beginning, especially at the beginning. But I want to highlight only 3 or the main challenges that I consider. The first one is the economic burden in the business plan. So whenever we get into a project where we have to design a drone or start building a drone and then selling it on the market, there's always the economic factor. When we don't consider regulations, we start building, we get our budget, we hire people for this, we hire people for that, we go do our own testing, our own features, and then we go into the market. But if we don't consider regulations, at some point, this regulatory plan will actually make us spend more money. If we haven't considered this at the beginning, from a business point of view, this will create an unexpected cost. Therefore, especially for small companies, this could actually kill a project if you haven't think about it. And if these things are not considered early enough, let's say, this could create a higher cost that actually, sorry to repeat myself, that could actually kill a company here. This would be, for me, one of the main challenges. The second challenge will be to be late for the certification and compliance activities. What is being late? So whenever you get investments, you want to prove a new concept, etc., you'll always be tied or bound by a timeline. So, okay, I could develop my stuff and then get, I don't know, beginning of January of 2026. If you don't consider these certifications, if you don't consider all the compliance activities that you have to do to place it into the market, to fly in a specific location, etc., if we don't consider all of these factors, timeline could actually deviate a lot. And this I have seen it for big companies and big industries. Timeline is not considered. Authorizations are not considered in the beginning. Certifications are not considered. Compliance, testing, all of these things that are missed in the beginning, it could create a deviation on the timeline at the end. And the last thing that I want to say is the change control. What I mean by change control, we are used, especially in the UAV industry, as you have seen, and unfortunately with the wars, but you have seen that there's a lot of improvement and very, very fast. A lot of changes very, very fast. So in our industry right now, every time that we make a change, we should know how to control it. It seems simple, it seems very, very simple, but it's not. Having a culture of change control is actually very hard for companies. And what do I mean with this? Okay, I have my system, I just make one change, I could keep track of it. Okay, when you start working with hundreds of people in a big company or a small company, whatever it is, keeping track of all the changes that have been introduced into the system is actually very, very complicated. It's not a simple process. And okay, so let's say we have considered all the certifications, we have considered all the timelines. Good, we are on track for this, but we don't know how to control these changes. So I get my certification, I move forward, new features, new updates, etc. I don't know how to keep control of this. Therefore, every time I want to make a change, I will need to repeat everything since the beginning. Well, if I have established a good control change, these, of course, there are some things that will need to be repeated, but some of them will not. Therefore, we will save time and cost, and of course,
Sure.
improve our systems in a much better way.
Yeah, as you mentioned, changes actually they have to be taken into account seriously because, okay, there are big changes that definitely okay, I need to review all my product, but sometimes a group of small changes that are not keeping, you are not keeping track of those, you end up changing very drastically your product and you didn't realize, so, or you realize it very late. So yeah, pay attention. If I can give an advice, pay attention to change control, as Alejandro mentioned. Next question. An annex to my previous question would be like, what is then the process or the steps to follow to obtain this class marking?
Okay, so let's say I'm a new company, I'm developing a new drone. What do I have to consider? What is my process? How do I plan for my class marking? But I'm also going to mention the CE marking. Well, first of all, we need to consider which regulations are going to be applicable to me. For example, radio equipment directive, or I don't know, the ROHS, or health and safety. All these regulations, the machinery directive also, and the drone regulation, which will be also applicable to me. Okay, I have considered all my regulations. What now? Well, you need to make sure all the requirements that are in the regulation are applicable to you. For example, if you have a C2 system, for example, or you want to certify a system under C2, you don't have to consider requirements for a C3, for example. Just a clear example. Then always create your case. How am I going to give compliance? Am I going to do some testing? Am I going to do some analysis? Am I going to do some documentation? Am I required to use a notified body? Because there, for example, for C1, C2, and C3, the regulation mandates you to go to a notified body to obtain the certification in this case.
Can you
Therefore,
notified body? I'm not sure if everyone understands this concept.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So just for awareness for everyone, notified bodies are those entities that have been accredited by their own national national accreditation body, which are allowed to do the certification, the class marking certification, from C0 to the C6, the DRI add-on, and the C5 accessories kits. In this sense, currently there are 6 notified bodies in Europe which are allowed to do these certifications, this class marking.
Well, thanks for the clarification and sorry for the interruption.
Not a problem. Mm-hmm. And just wanted to say that in some cases, these notified bodies are strictly needed. Therefore, you cannot skip or avoid this step. So you need to plan on all these steps. And of course, if you need to use a laboratory, engage with them early on the process. Make sure you understand what the process is going to be, what do you need to submit, information, documentation, etc. And for the class marking specifically, get to know the standards, which is actually what you are going to be testing during your campaign.
Okay, thanks. I have another question. How do you think this regulation will impact the economical model of the current drone sector manufacturers, operators?
Well, this regulation, I don't want to be negative about it, but I believe that we are just seeing the beginning of these regulations to really start to be in place. And I do believe that smaller companies, especially the ones that haven't taken this into account or that they have a really hard time to really comply with the regulations, they unfortunately are going to disappear. It's naturally, I mean, there's a big sector, there are a lot of startups nowadays, but these regulations will make sure that everything is safe to be flown, and there are going to be some systems that are not safe enough, or that this economic burden will actually affect them. Nevertheless, I do believe that with time down the line, the costs of the certifications are going to get down. also the knowledge of the operators, knowledge of manufacturers is going to go up. Therefore, the time and cost will be actually balanced somehow. But especially for those that cannot pass the first hurdle, they might fall. And I do believe there's going to be a lot of marriages down the line.
Okay, interesting. And do you think there are some evolutions to be expected in the regulations too? Like in terms of maturity, maybe they are gonna become like more, I don't know, or less conservative, like giving more
Yeah.
space to different operations to take place. Okay.
Yeah, for me, I think there are going to be a lot of changes in the future down the line. I'm aware of some of them that could potentially happen, and I know EASA is very, very active on reaching out, making consultations, getting input from everyone. And I do believe that they know what they have. They are aware of the struggles for the companies, and they want to make sure that whenever we open up gradually. We don't open up completely because that could be unsafe, but
Yeah.
it's open up gradually. We are starting to see a lot of operations. I don't know, but from my work, basically, we start to see a lot of flying authorizations, a lot of uh, more class mark systems, more certifications, etc. And we know they are starting to open up. Afterwards, I cannot say what's going to happen, but I know there are going to be some changes down the line.
Okay. Okay, nice. And what do you advise to the main drones actors in regards to the current regulations?
Well, I think it could be inferred from all the conversation that basically take into account all the regulations since the beginning of a project. Do not wait until the end. Of course, you don't have to go for them directly, but at least start reading them, start getting to know them, start talking with notified bodies, laboratories, people in the sector, EASA, participating in standardization groups. Whatever it is, the activity that you do, keeping always up to date with them and considering them since the beginning will help a lot down the line. Basically, as I said, if we don't consider them since the beginning, the time and cost could actually increase or could even be very, very dangerous for a company. The other thing that I would say here is try to get into the national or international associations. For example, I could mention ASD Stand, Sensenelec, which are developing the standards for the open category at this moment, and the standard scenarios, sorry. For example, Yarus is also another association, JEDA, or try to keep up with their news and with EASA news, newsletters, etc. Because as we know, this is new. This is starting to evolve. We have seen drones for many years now, but the regulations are starting to appear. Argentina just approved SORA now. Japan, I think they're about to do the same. So basically, we are starting to see progress now and keeping up with the future, keeping up with what is EASA thinking about, what are the governments thinking about, how can this improve in the future, will give you an upper hand when you move down the line. And of course, anticipate and talk with all regulators. As I said, if you have the opportunity to engage in conversations, participate in forums, attend events, that could be very, very helpful.
Sure, sure. Well, I don't have any more questions listed here for you. I have some in my head. Let's see if we have some questions on the chat. I have one here, and I want to encourage the people to keep asking questions. Don't hesitate. There is no bad question. All of them can be answered somehow. So yes, don't hesitate to write down your questions. More than a question, I read here a remark that's saying that's why big drone manufacturers such as DJI at this time have the economic monopoly. Okay, I think we can all agree that this is the biggest actor in the industry. Do you agree with this remark?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's what we have in the industry. DJI, knew what to do since the beginning. They have been doing basically what I just mentioned here, keeping up to date with the regulations, participating in all the standardization groups, either international or even European ones. And I would say they were a couple of the first ones to comply with the regulations and obtain the C-class markings.
Yeah.
And of course, as our guests are saying, probably they are going to be the main monopoly here. But of course, that doesn't mean that there is no room for the rest. It's
Yeah,
just that they have to consider this.
exactly. Yeah. As you mentioned, there are probably some companies, small companies that are gonna fail, right, because of this new economical burden, because of the regulations. But a balance can be created to give some place for small companies to also grow and survive in this industry. I believe that this can change. I agree that this is the reality now. The AI is the biggest actor, but we are creating. I mean, Europe is creating the regulatory framework for to create a space to others to become also as big as the AI. Right. Let me read the comments here. Okay, there's another question here. Drones are likely to be easily accessible to large public. Is there any planned transnational control on this device to maintain its use under the scope of the law, for example, in private life protection?
This is an interesting question. It deviates a little bit from the scope or the target of the conversation, but I think I could try to take it down to our conversation somehow. Just for awareness, there is one of the requirements in the regulation, especially for systems weighing over 250 grams. There is the DRI. This is the direct remote ID, the direct remote identification, which it's always transmitting the position of the UAV. Okay, so basically, for someone interested, they could access it publicly. What is that drone doing? The range is not that big, okay, but there is something out there. Okay, I like to compare it like to flight radar, but in a smaller in a smaller scale, a way smaller scale. In this sense, I know for a fact that there are a lot of projects, but this is not from EASA or the CAAs, etc. It's more about from public safety, police, etc. That they are working on detecting all these events, all these drones, all these systems that are flying over our heads that we are not aware of. And I know they can detect a lot, but sorry, this is not my best topic here, and I don't really know how they do it. But I've seen it with my own eyes that the police stop someone in the street for flying where they couldn't be doing it. This happened here in Madrid.
Okay, next question. I think it was said, but I miss it. Until when can I use a drone without CE marking?
Without CE marking or class marking?
I guess they mean class marking too, but
Okay, because
so
for the CE marking, technically, okay, and we are technically here, it's no system is allowed to be placed in the market without the CE marking. If a market inspection sees that, they could raise a finding, try to investigate why it doesn't have the CE marking. With the class marking, technically, all drones without the class marking are allowed to fly as legacy drones. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 2026 of next year, January 2026. After that, the privately built ones, this is basically if you get the system and you build it yourself, you get the motors, you get the propellers, etc., and you build it yourself. So basically, there is no economic transaction. You are not selling the drones in the end or whatever. Then
okay.
you can fly them in the in the subcategory A3. I'm not wrong. I'm not an operator myself. Okay, and But they're basically, to sum up, if you just bought the system, the legacy system, okay, you have a legacy system, you will be able to fly it until 2026. Afterwards, it will get more difficult to fly it. I don't want to say impossible, because there are going to be probably some ways to bypass this, such as asking for an authorization or something, but there is no mandatory requirement as of today.
Okay, thank you, Alex. There are some comments here. I'm going to read them. And it's from C. Lelu. I don't really get the question, but you can open your mic to complete if I get it wrong. A drone without C marking may be used in open category sub A3. It's RGPD regulation. I don't know if they are related comments. It's from C. Lelu. You can open your mic if you want to clarify this remark or question.
In the meantime, just to address that, a drone without this class marking may be used in the open categories, the subcategory A3. This is correct. The legacy ones are allowed to do this. And then after next year, some drones, especially the privately built, R&D, yeah, those, the subcategory 3 is, just for awareness, is the more the less risky one, probably, because it's like 150 meters away from people, out of nowhere, okay, like in the middle of the countryside. It's really hard to really have a risk in that position. So it's like the way to go for those systems. For example, if you don't have a system with the class marking, you might be able to fly it here, but after 2026, no system could be placed in the market. So you actually cannot get it without the class marking anymore. It's going to be impossible to fly it.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
I don't know if that answers the question. Sorry. If I'm making it more complicated, please comment it.
Yeah. So another question here. Are there, maybe it's not very related, but I let you answer as you can. Are there any plan to implement regulation on mandatory transponder-like system in UAV? This will allow smoother interactions in crowded airspace.
This, I know there are some projects, people are working on it, but the problem with the mandatory transponder-like system is that when we think about what is the UAV, what can the UAV face when they go into the airspace? If I ask you, like, hey, what can you face in a flight? Well, an aircraft, okay, an A320. Okay, maybe a smaller jet, as not a jet, sorry, a small aircraft. Okay, but there are a lot of actors in the airspace that we are not aware of. General aviation, they don't have any, like, many requirements for the transponders right now. Therefore, it's very hard to detect. I think this is not part of the 945 regulation. It's more about the SORA, okay? But this is more related to the airspace, the confliction, and tactical mitigations, basically. To answer clearly the question, there's some regulations working, but I don't think the mandatory transponder-like system will be something really coming into place. I think there might be some transponder-like regulations, or like trying to enforce a little bit more of the awareness of the systems, especially because if a system goes, if an unmanned system goes to flight and a general aviation crashes into it, it's a huge problem, even if it is not the UAV's fault. Okay, it's a life that could be in danger here. But yes, there are some things coming probably down the line, but it will not be probably mandatory.
Okay, thank you again, Alex. And I have a very interesting comment here. I would like to know your opinion. Some manufacturers are selling kits to upgrade drone and then comply with class marking requirements. So what can you say about it?
It's kind of tricky because manufacturers are selling kits to upgrade drone and then comply with the class marking requirement. This is I think they are talking about the C5 accessories kit.
Mm-hmm.
It's tricky because a C5 accessory kit, it's only allowed for a C3 system. What I mean, you can place your C5 accessory kit in a C3 system. So you are already certified. The only thing is that you have to go for the C5 to go into the standard scenario 01.
Yeah. It's like introducing a change where you already have a legal framework that already measure the consequences of this change, so it can be accepted if you follow all these requirements, right? Something like that. Very nice. Okay, good. I don't have any more questions. We have 10 more minutes left, so don't hesitate to still ask questions about this subject or any other related with drones. We'll try to to give as much information as we can. Let's take advantage of the presence of Alejandro. In the meantime, I have a question for you, Alejandro. So you said that these C-class marked drones are oriented to the open category, right? Like it's like a decision a manufacturer has to make what market to address. If they address the open category, they are naturally go for a C. They must go for a C-class marking. Is it also interesting for an operator in the specific category to use C-class marked drones? Is there an advantage for them?
That's a really interesting question. I do believe that this is the case. When you obtain a C3 system, for example, that you can also use it in the specific category when we are talking about the Sale 1, Sale 2, Sale 3 operations. Having a system that has undergone, especially the C1s, C2s, and C3, which have forcibly gone to a notified body, so a third party has done an assessment, just going into the authority and saying, hey, I have a C3 class marked system, sorry, this will give a lot of benefit or a lot of trustworthy from the authority towards your system. So basically just, I'm going to say that, I don't know, I'm going to talk about a Spanish company. Quantum is Spanish, sorry, a European company instead of a Chinese company. So a European company, Quantum Systems, for example, they go, they have a C3 class marking, and they go into an operational authorization. Well, someone has already verified this requirement. And then you just get, I don't know, I develop a system with my cousin, and we go into the authority and we say, hey, we have our system here. Well, this is not certified. No one has actually looked into this. What am I going to do with this? How can I be sure that your system is not at risk for the rest of the users? There are certain ways that you can do it, but of course, a C3 gives you more confidence that the system is.
Okay, that's interesting. It means that for manufacturers that decided to go for the C-class marking because they are oriented more oriented to open category, they can also find a demand in the specific category users, because for them it's easier to get the authorizations with a class marked drone.
I do believe so, yes.
Okay. Another question from Silelu. Thank you, Silelu, for your participation. You are the you are the best participant of the. Where you are all very good participants, and that I appreciate the interaction of Silelu. What about RPAs? SA RPs developed by ICAO. Will there be benefit to EASA regulation?
I do believe so. Just for a little bit of context, and we are deviating a little bit from the class marking, but under SORA, for EASA, for example, from the EASA regulation, if we go and look into SORA, there are a lot of OSOs with our operational safety objectives. Basically, how do you comply with this assurance level? Okay, those require normally that your system is designed or your maintenance manual is designed according to certain standards, according to industry standards or other standards that you may use. These standards that he or she is mentioning could become a benefit for these systems, not for the whole regulation, but at least for some specific authorizations. Nevertheless, as we have been talking, EASA just took JARUS regulation because SORA was developed by JARUS and EASA took it. Of course, they've been working together, but I mean, EASA adopted basically. I don't know if in the future we might see this, that EASA is accepting an ICAO standard to be used or like to be formally used. Of course, you can always use any standard that you want, but there might be some other formal method or other formal way to accept it afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Now I have one question for you about the timeline of obtaining the final certification of the class marking. Because if it takes, like, let's say, I don't know. So if you tell me 2 years, does it mean that the product must be like with a fixed configuration during 2 years? What can you tell me about it?
So basically, when we think about the class marking, there are, I would say, like at most 20 requirements for the C2 class, basically. We are not looking at the very, very complex requirements or a very, very long campaigns. If we can think about 1, 2, 3 months, depending on each system is different. So each system could be like have a lot of flight modes. So if you have to try and play with 10 flight modes, then of course your flying time is going to be longer, etc. But I would say that somewhere around 1 to 2 months for something simple and 2 to 3 months for something a little bit more complex would be an interesting timeline here.
Okay.
But I would also comment here that the longest time invested in any of these processes is always related to documentation. When I mentioned about change control, I didn't want to focus on the documentation, but documentation-wise, smaller companies struggle a lot. They just want to build, they just want to update software, etc. But there's nothing documented, or there's little documented. In this sense, the lack of documentation is a huge burden that they have to overcome to achieve certifications or class markings, etc. So for me, I would also focus not only on the systems. I think honestly, complying with the regulation is not something that is impossible or is a huge commitment. It's just making sure that your system is tweaked the way the regulation is forcing you to do. But then the documentation is very, very important.
Okay, thanks. That's an interesting insight. So yeah, I don't have any more questions. I don't have any more questions myself. We get 2 more minutes left, so I think it's a good timing to start closing the session. Thank you very much, Alex, for your participation and your contribution. I'm sure it's been like a very richful and interesting content for all the participants. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, all the interactions. Thanks for your continuing support. We are more and more every time that I'm organizing a session. And if you have any interesting topic that you would like to share in the domain of the new technologies in the aerospace industry, don't hesitate to send us a message. You can find us on the YouTube channel. There is a LinkedIn a page as well, LinkedIn group. I'm gonna write down my email so you can also suggest topics or just contact me to find any answer related to this association. We can talk together and work together to keep contributing with the community with this relevant and updated information that help us all to make better decisions. So thank you again. Thank you, Esther, for the organization.
Thank you too.
Again, Alejandro. And you are
Thank
free
you.
to go whenever you.
Thank you, Julio, for having me today. And just hope everyone liked the session, everyone learned a little bit. For any question, you can reach out to me, to Julio, whatever it is needed. I think these activities are really powerful, to be honest, because it's just sharing because we want to share. And I think it's giving a lot of information to the people trying to help build a big community. We have always heard drones are the future, but we have to build it and we have to work together to build it.
That's true.